Shadow Mewtwo has made its way into raids this weekend in Pokemon Go, and hopefully many of you were able to get your hands on at least a few. Now some of you might be asking yourselves though, should I purify this Pokemon? Now in the past, this answer was strictly no, because not only are Shadow Pokemon 20% more powerful than normal Pokemon, but the only way to obtain Shadow Mewtwo was with a Super Rocket Radar to battle Giovanni, specifically when it was in rotation. The last time this happened, that was in November of 2022, and before that it was somewhere back in 2020 if I remember correctly. That's not really that common, is it? And you could only get one unless you stacked your Super Rocket Radars, which really wasn't a strategy until much later in the game. Most of the players, especially the casual players, were really not doing this. Now with all that being said though, because of this weekend, a lot more players are actually able to get access to Shadow Mewtwo, so now they might actually have an abundance of this once super rare Pokemon that was extremely meta, and they might even possibly have multiple with really good IVs. So I wanted to go ahead and reevaluate this question again because I feel like the answer actually has kind of changed now. So the first thing that we actually need to do is compare how good Shadow Mewtwo is compared to its regular counterpart. Like I mentioned earlier, Shadow Pokemon receive a 20% boost to their attack, but they also unfortunately take on a 20% reduction to their defense. So you might be thinking, well, isn't that going to make Mewtwo super fragile? The answer is yes, but its attack definitely makes up for it. Now if we take a look at the DPS times TDO spreadsheet for Mewtwo versus Shadow Mewtwo, we're going to mainly be focusing on the Psychic typing by the way, as this is going to benefit from Stab, but we can see that Confusion and Psystrike is about 8 points higher than its normal counterpart, which on the ER scale is a significant difference. Even with Shadow Ball, which doesn't benefit from Stab, it also showcases excellent DPS times TDO, which is also why it's one of the best Ghost type attackers to use in the game, despite not actually being a Ghost typing. We can also see that Shadow Mewtwo paired with a number of its potential movesets pulls over 40 plus points in its generalist attacker roles. What this basically means is that no matter what the raid boss is, you can pretty much use Shadow Mewtwo and it's gonna do pretty good. Now don't get me wrong, this is not gonna be as good compared to if you actually built a raid team that utilizes the right typings, but considering that many casual players just jump into raids with the recommended teams that are provided, and granted, many of them may be returning players to the game or just newer players to the game, that's okay, you all gotta start somewhere, but if you start with Shadow Mewtwo, you're gonna be starting in a really good spot. Now I do want to clarify that this is not how I would personally use Shadow Mewtwo, but even if you did use them like this, it wouldn't be that bad. Ideally though, you do want to take advantage of the Stab and pair it with Confusion and Psystrike at the bare minimum. You could also pair it with Shadow Ball as well. We're going to get into why you want to do that later on in the video, but as of right now, just Confusion and then the Elite TM to get Psystrike makes a lot of sense. If you don't have any Elite TMs to get Psystrike, which is its signature move that was only released in raids, you can also just go ahead and TM it to get Psychic. That's also pretty good, but Psystrike is definitely going to be a lot better. Now in the past, I've actually used this example many times, a 0% IV Shadow Mewtwo versus a 100% IV regular Mewtwo. A lot of people get this confused, thinking that IVs are super important on their Pokemon, but that's not actually correct, because the correct order goes base stats of a Pokemon, Shadow bonus, and then IVs. You pretty much have to think about IVs as an additional boost to the base stats, but the Shadow bonus is a 20% boost to the base stats, making it significantly better. Now of course you could have the best of everything, right? You could have, the Shadow boost plus really good IVs, that's totally possible, but I can guarantee you many players are probably not going to power up their Shadow Mewtwo because they don't think it has good IVs. Guys, trust me, compared to regular Mewtwo, your Shadow Mewtwo, even with the worst IVs, is going to be so much better than it. Now with that being said, that doesn't mean that the 100% IV Mewtwo doesn't carry its own value. So let's get into that and give you guys some more food for thought. Alright, so first of all, when you purify a Pokemon, the IVs are increased by 2 across the board. Now for example, if you actually have an IV that is already maxed at 15, it's not going to increase any further, it can only go up to the max. So for example, if you had 14 attack and you purified, it would only go to 15. Basically though, what this means is that if you purify a Shadow Mewtwo with a minimum IV spread of 13, 13, 13, that will turn into a perfect 15, 15, 15, or also known as a 100% IV Pokemon. And yeah, that's basically how you get the hundo right there. Keeping that in mind though, I just said that a Shadow Mewtwo with a 0% IV spread is still going to be better than the regular, so why would you want to do this if the hundo is not even going to be that good? Well, it's actually because Mewtwo has a Mega Evolution in the future, and this is going to be better than the Shadow. but you can only have one Mega Evolution active at a time, so you're only going to be able to have one Mega Mewtwo, meaning that you're gonna need something else to fill the rest of your raid party. Taking a look at the Mega versus the Shadow though on the DPS times TDO spreadsheet, we can see that it's 7 points higher. Now that still doesn't really answer the question though, do you really need the Hundo for this Mega Pokemon? Ideally, if you're gonna get it to level 50, I mean, wouldn't you want it to be the Hundo? I would want it to be the Hundo, like that would be the best thing to power up, like you literally can have no regrets about powering up a Hundo like that. So I mean, it definitely makes it a lot easier to commit, that's for sure. But one thing that I want to point out here is that the IV floor for Shadow Raids is 666, and while it may seem more difficult to actually get this spread, you actually have far better odds compared to normal raids because you can Purify it for an extra +2 IVs across the board. So it's actually much easier to get that minimum IV spread, right, at least 13, 13, 13, like that could be, you know, 15, 13, 14, 13, 14, 15, 13, 14, 13, it doesn't matter guys. People have done the math, I'm pretty sure it was like a 1 out of 39 chance to actually get an IV spread that is at least a minimum 13 spread, which is, you know, not that crazy when you think about it. Compared to getting like a Hundo normally from raids, I believe that's a lot higher, maybe like 1 out of 128 or something along those lines, like 1 out of 300, I don't even know for sure, but I just know on average it takes quite a lot of raids, or at least it can take quite a lot of raids to get that Hundo. If you're lucky, you know, sometimes you will just end up getting them, but that's just RNG at the end of the day. Now, going back to the main question though, does this mean that you should Purify your Shadow Mewtwo? And this is where my answer has changed given the recent, you know, crazy updates that we've seen in Pokemon Go. I'm gonna say yes. If you have at least 5 other Shadow Mewtwo, then I would definitely consider it if you have that minimum IV spread of at least 13, 13, 13. And the reason for that is because of what I said earlier, guys. Shadow Mewtwo is still far better than regular Mewtwo, but you still want to have that Mega Mewtwo on your team. So ideally your dream team for raids for Psychic type attackers is going to be Mega Mewtwo Y, plus 5 Shadow Mewtwo, all with Psystrike, which yes, they are going to require a lot of elite charge TMs, but you can get these for free from GBL each season. I definitely take advantage of it. I highly recommend you guys do as well. Even if you don't like GBL, trust me guys, it's not that difficult to just tank your battles and just make sure you're getting like a few wins every single day. It truly is just minimal effort at this point because there are so many other players who do it. Now I do also want to go over what I'm personally going to do, as I know a lot of you guys do actually find that information valuable. So I actually have 100% IV Mewtwo that I got from raids a few years ago. I've been working on powering that one up to level 50, and then I also want to get a few Shadow Mewtwo up to level 40 as well. Now the reason I don't want to get all those Shadow Mewtwo up to level 50 is because there's always a possibility that Niantic might release a more powerful version of Mewtwo in the future. This is kind of unlikely, but it's not completely off the table, right? Because we did see Apex Lugia and we also saw Apex Ho-Oh. So Apex Shadow Mewtwo, that could actually happen. I mean, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I mean, it definitely could, and I don't want to power up, you know, a team of 6 if I'm just going to end up having to power up one of those Apex in the future. You know, it's really hard to say, guys. Power creeps are kind of inevitable. With that being said, though, no matter how you slice this, it's really difficult to go wrong with a stacked team of Shadow Mewtwo. Now, let's say I've convinced you by this point, and maybe some of you guys were already convinced before you came into this video. Either way, your Shadow Mewtwo currently have Frustration, and you can't TM it away. So what do you do about this? Well, unfortunately, you're gonna have to wait until the next Team Go Rocket event comes into rotation, which it was really dumb that they didn't do it this time around, given that this was like a major Team Go Rocket event, but they didn't, and unfortunately, that's the only time when TM Frustration is a featured bonus. So maybe we'll see this in a few months. It's really difficult to say. Alternatively though, if you are impatient and you just want to go ahead and have that Shadow Mewtwo be functionable already, you can go ahead and unlock the second charge move and you can get Psystrike there. It's just going to be a regular moveset on top of Frustration, and when you can TM Frustration away, you know, you can add the other moveset of your choice. If you guys are in the situation where you don't really have that many good Pokemon, I can see where this actually kind of makes sense to not wait to TM Frustration away, but if you guys have a bunch of other really good Pokemon, then I really just wouldn't do this. I would just be patient and wait a few months. On that topic though, should you actually unlock the second charge move on all of your Shadow Mewtwo? Eventually over time, I would actually say yeah. I mean, I know many of you guys are going to hesitate to do this, which I can totally understand. It costs a lot of Stardust to do this. But given that Mewtwo has such a wide range of movesets, this will pretty much allow you to keep an exclusive move like Psystrike and pair it with anything else of your choosing, assuming you decide not to go Shadow Ball, which I would actually say a lot of people choose to go with Shadow Ball. I personally did. I did Psystrike and Shadow Ball on my Hundo, and then I also did Psystrike and Shadow Ball on the first Shadow Mewtwo I got. So I mean, I'm pretty much a good example that it's definitely worth it to go that route, but if you want a more flexible choice of options, like you could run Flamethrower, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Focus Blast, there's probably another one in there that I'm missing. Those would be good options as well, just as a generalist attacker role. I mean, you're definitely going to have a lot of charge TMs on deck, otherwise, you know, you're going to really struggle to get those movesets to roll in your favor. Shadow Ball and Psy Strike are both exclusive movesets. You have to use Elite TMs to get them. They're no longer available in the game. So that's definitely a difficult choice to make, because if you double Elite TM your Mewtwo, you won't be able to TM it to anything else for that generalist role, which is fine if you have like other Pokemon to fit those, you know, categories like I already do, so it doesn't matter for me. But if you're in a situation where you don't actually have that set up, then I would just Elite TM to get Psy Strike and then keep that other moveset available for pretty much anything else that you would want to use it for. And again, like, you're gonna have to TM it every single time a raid boss comes into rotation, but just know that you're probably going to be doing a decent amount of damage, regardless if that's not even like the Pokemon that has type advantage, right? Because you're going to be running like Psycho Cut, plus maybe Flamethrower or Ice Beam or something along those lines. But take my word for it, guys, like, there are people that use Lugia in raids. You are going to do so much more damage than them, and I'm also going to be very proud of you for that. Of course, though, the decision is ultimately yours to make, but at the very least, I would Elite TM to get Psy Strike on your Shadow Mewtwo. One of our final questions here is, should you use Shadow Mewtwo for PvP? So the only relevant league that Shadow Mewtwo is actually viable in is Master League with Psycho Cut, Psy Strike, and Shadow Ball, like I mentioned earlier. Now, I know a lot of people think that Shadow Mewtwo is going to be really good to use in Great League and Ultra League. It's not. Like, it's actually terrible to use. If you look it up on PvPoke, you'll see that it's really, really bad. It just doesn't have the bulk that it needs, like it does in Master League. So, I mean, if you end up getting close to the hundo, you can definitely choose to run this, but to be fair, the regular Mewtwo is also really good on its own, like it's actually slightly better. The Shadow Mewtwo is going to cost a lot more Stardust and a lot more candy, so keep that in mind. I mean, for less resources, you're more or less going to get the same thing with the regular hundo. I would just go with that. Keep in mind that if you do actually want to power up your Shadow Mewtwo to level 50, I would recommend anything that's probably like 96% IV with 15 attack or higher. That would be like a safe investment for Master League. I mean, I'm sure you could probably run something a little bit lower and still come out with all of the same matchups. Now finally, to wrap things up, a few months ago I actually made a video covering my viewers' most frequently asked questions about Shadow Mewtwo. So if you guys still have questions after watching this video, I would highly recommend checking out that video next. But before you go, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you all real soon in the next one.